Hi everybody, welcome to Our Worship Sound. My name is Peter, and today I want to show you another worship keyboard tutorial. And a general rule for worship, I would say, is that you want to eliminate moments of unintentional silence in your worship sets. I believe that silence can be a wonderful form of worship, but when it's unintentional, it can really disrupt the flow of what you're trying to do in worship. So some of the things that can create unintentional silence are things like we need to stop so the musicians can change their sheet music. Another thing is that just not knowing how to change keys properly between songs. So that's what I want to show you today. Is just a couple of things you can use to change keys more smoothly and more effectively from song to song in your worship set. So the first method I want to show you is to play the 5 chord of the new key, or what we call the dominant chord. If I was playing a song in whatever key and then I was going to shift to something in the key of C, I could play the 5 chord in the key of C. So the 5 chord would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to build a chord based off this G. So I have a G major chord. And this is especially effective if you use a variation like the sus4 chord, or maybe the 7th, or any upper extension of the 7th. So we can go to 7, 9, 11, 13. And if you had like a gospel song, or maybe like even an old hymn that you're kind of trying to reharmonize, that G13 might work really well. But this dominant chord is really effective at making the 1 chord sound like home. So no matter where I am, say if I'm in the key of A, and I finish a song there, if I play the dominant chord of the key of C, it's going to make that C sound like home. So now that we know we're home, it sounds like we're at rest after hearing this chord resolve to that. So playing the dominant chord of the new key will help get you there. I wouldn't say this is the most musical, and it's not the most musical way to do it. It doesn't always sound the best. But if you're having trouble figuring out another way to do it smoothly, this is kind of the fail-safe, and it'll work every time. So the second method that I would like to show you is finding a common note from in between the chords. So let's say we're going from the key of E major to the key of C major. So the key of E major has, or the chord in E has E, G sharp, and B, and the C chord has C, E, and G. And the one note that's common between those two chords is the E. So what we can do is kind of play around that E to transition to the new key of C major. So we're going to end our song in E major. Then we're going to highlight this E. Kind of let the other notes fade out. And then add the new notes from the C major chord, and we're in C major now. Another example is if we were going from E major to G. E major, or here's the E chord, here's the G chord. You'll notice that the note in common is the B. So now we're going to play around that B chord. Or the B note, rather. And especially if you have a pad sound, you can kind of let that play through. So here's our E chord. And then add the other notes from the G chord. See, that sounds pretty smooth. Okay. One more example, if I go from E to A flat, which sounds really awkward because we're going from 4 sharps to 4 flats. But if you watch, there's a note in common between those two. And even though it's G sharp in one chord and A flat in another chord, it's the same note. So we can play around that note. And it's very smooth. It doesn't disrupt the flow at all to do that. So that's a good way to do it. Method 2 is finding the common note between the two chords. Method 3 is what you use when there are no common notes between those chords. So then you have to start looking at common notes between the two scales. So if we're going from E major to, say, B flat, there's only one note. If we look at the scales, and then B flat is this, there's only one note that's common between those two scales, and that's A. So we have to work a little bit to get to that A, to play around with it, but it can help us to get us to transition. So here's our E, and I'm going to switch to an A chord, kind of let the other notes fade out, And now I'm going to play transition chord using the dominant chord of B, which is F, and just kind of do an F over A. So we have our dominant chord, but we're highlighting this A. So we did have to do a little bit more work to get there. Again, we're going to kind of work around with the A because that's common between those two scales. So now we're still in the key of E, we're just playing the 4 chord of E, but now we're going to highlight that A. Now we're in the B. So this method doesn't sound as smooth as finding the common notes between the chords, but when you don't have those common chord tones, this will work, and it requires a little bit more work to get there, but it does work. I would slip another kind of half step in here. Method 3.5 would be to play something melodic and just kind of gradually work into that new key. So if I was to start out in E, I'm still going to try to find that A. Gradually kind of slip in another. So just play around with that experiment, but that's something you can do, is to play melodically and just kind of ease into the new key. Method 4 is just go directly to that new chord. And you can use this to kind of make a bold statement. It's dramatic, but you could use it effectively to say, with this new song, we're going to make a bold statement or a strong statement to God. Okay? So, for example, say if I'm in B flat and I'm going to go to C. Kind of real soft, and then boom. It's kind of a jolt, but it could wake everybody up and say, hey, we're going in a really strong direction with this song. We're going to make a bold statement. And so that can be really effective. So, method 5 is might sound like cheating, but it's a really good solution, and that is to simply, if you can do it on the fly, change the keys of one of the songs to make the chord change simpler. For example, if you have if you're in 3 sharps in the key of A major, it's going to be much more smooth to go to 2 sharps because it has more scale notes in common than going to 3 flats. Okay, so to go from A to D is going to be a lot easier, because from 3 sharps to 2 sharps is pretty easy. But to go from 3 sharps to 3 flats is going to take a little bit more work. So what you can do is take one of those songs, maybe just take the E flat one down to D. Okay, so and play that whole song in the key of D instead of E flat. It's going to make the transition much smoother. And your singer's going to love it too, because then they get to sing half a step lower and they won't have to work as hard. So just take the simpler of the 2 songs, change the key slightly, and you can make a much smoother transition that way. So there's a few methods you can use to help transition between songs more easily and just create more of a flow in your worship set. At this point, I would love to have you connect with me on my website, ourworshipsound.com. And also subscribe on the YouTube channel. You can connect with me through Twitter and Facebook. And also at my website, you can download a free worship EP that I've done called Draw Me In. And I hope you'll take advantage of these opportunities. I'd love to hear from you. Contact me through my website, or just leave a comment on this video. And let me know if there's something I can do to be of service to you, and to help you just kind of get to the next level where you're trying to get to. I'd love to help you do that. So until then, God bless. Take care. Thank you very much.